president at Spotlight Development Inc., Sherry Larjani. I loved listening to you talk at the Power and Purpose Summit, which I attended. And I was very interested in your views on things like affordability in housing and multi-generational homes. What do you think is the single biggest design flaw in current affordable housing models that your team is trying to fix?
Well, I think one of the biggest and the major flaw that I see, and it is something that keeps on being repeated, is that we tend to have the projects with just a rental affordable. When it comes to affordability, we consider rental as only the only affordable way to enter the market, and I think that's the biggest flaw because there are a lot of people that are now being sort of stopped from being able to afford owning a home, even though
Mhm.
that's their intention, and renting a home is not. And these communities, most of these communities, and again there are some exemptions, but most of the communities that are designed around affordable housing do not have services enough, community benefits, as you want to call them, or wraparound services to allow the people that are struggling be able to get some help and do better and prosper. So I
Mhm.
think these are the two flaws I see: concentrating on one model and also not having enough services.
Yeah, I loved your statement at the summit. We don't need more party rooms, and we'll get to that for sure. We've seen a kind of a shift towards multi-generational housing as a response to the affordability crisis. How do you think the actual construction and zoning of these buildings need to change to support, say, a 70-year-old and then a 7-year-old under the same roof effectively?
It's not an issue of zoning. Zoning is something that is going to affect the type of building and the heights and all the other variations that we would need in order to build it. But when it comes to the design and the architectural design aspect of it, then that's when we need to pay attention to the multi-generational side of the
Mhm.
units. You're living with grandparents. Grandparents are a bit more elderly. They need their quiet time. They need their separate spaces so that they can, relax or have their time away from the 7-year-old. And then the 7-year-old, on the other hand, is hyper and has energy and wants to run around and wants to do so many things that make noise. So how do you make these spaces so that these multi-generational families can actually use those spaces? Soundproofing some of their rooms, making sure that there's maybe two floors to the unit so that the grandparents can be upstairs, the family can be downstairs, or vice versa, depending on the design. But sound separations and things like that, or maybe the amenities in the building, like just we did in the Reina projects, should pay attention to making sure that they have soundproof rooms where the kids can
Yeah.
go there, play their loud games, play their piano, instruments, whatever the case may be, without disturbing everybody else in the household, right? So I think those
Mhm.
are mainly not zoning related, but design related, right? So I think architects and designers and developers who instruct them on how to design need to be paying attention to all those details.
Yeah. Well, that dovetails nicely into my next question. It was an all women led team for Reina. Was there a specific design blind spot that the team identified early on that perhaps a traditional male led team might have overlooked?
I can't say it was so much of just anything specific. Obviously, we had Taya Cook, my partner, who obviously saw that there is a need for this type of a project to make an impact in our industry. But as we were sitting around the table, there were many things that we would find. I actually mentioned it in that conversation, sitting with someone that mentioned the flaw about the size of a laundry area or a closet inside of a unit, or security and safety for women with lighting and whatever the case may be that you would provide in a building, or the use of the amenities, or better use of the amenities. Don't get me wrong, we do have a party room in the project, but we also have other amenities. We have the child space, we have the gym area where you can overlook the kids play area, so you can watch over your kids and you can still exercise, or the
Mhm.
areas where there's the soundproof room where you can play music and you can do all the rest of the stuff that you want to do, or we have a vending machine area where kids can go there and play and have fun and think that they're outside without having to put them in the potential danger outside of the building. All
Yeah.
of these added to the value that we were bringing into the project, as well as the multi-generational units. We do have many units that when we were designing, we were thinking about the multi-generational families that could potentially be living here, with the spaces and the separation of the spaces and all of that. So we did think about a lot of it. Maybe there are many projects where they have one or two or three of these taken into consideration, but bringing it all together was something that we were very proud of. And I think it was also the fact that we listened to everybody else around the table, right? We were talking,
Yeah.
we were collaborating, and we were discussing the things that we were going to potentially do in the project.
Yeah, and collaboration is so important. I know you've championed the idea of women supporting each other from the C-suite all the way down to boots on the ground. And I loved your comment at Power and Purpose that said, if you want to solve the problem, don't be the problem. What is one practical thing that a female developer can do to ensure that women on the actual crew maybe feel seen and supported as allies?
I think my conversation on the C-suite side was definitely towards women that are in the places of power, and that does
Mm,
include a developer, obviously. So it is a matter of empowering the people that are around you, and we
yeah.
say this and we just take it so lightly, right? So in this space of you being a boss and being a supervisor over some other woman, I think it's a matter of encouragement. It's the matter of making sure that they're seen, making sure that they're heard, and making sure that the work that they do and the energy that they put into their work is seen and it's noticed,
Yes.
right? And I think that would
Yeah.
allow them to potentially move up the ladder and do greater things in their career.
Mm,
That's when it comes to being a good boss, right? So I think when you know that is a common theme that can be happening for women and men, and I tend to see that there are a lot of instances where, unfortunately, some of the or older or more experienced women CEOs might not recognize that and might not see the need for that. And I think that also comes back from their personal experience. As they were coming through the system, the generations before us, they had to struggle with so much and they had to deal with so much and they had to fight, literally fight their way, that they think that maybe someone like me is being handed it easy or is
mhm.
getting it easy. So they think that they need to let us go through the same way they did so that we kind of feel
Yeah.
what they're feeling. Unfortunately, that is a feeling I get from certain instances in the industry. But it's not just a woman CEO in a place of power that I was talking about where they're supervising you or they're in a position of your boss. What I was referring to on that day was if we are in a position where we can allow another woman to use the services that we have. I've had one of the biggest issues and biggest stops of my projects, and that detrimentally hurt my project, my financials, and my business was a city councilor. It was
Mm,
an older, a very old lady who made sure that the mission in her life is to stop my projects from happening. That is a no-no. Instead of empowering all the men around you that I see and making sure that you tend to their needs and you listen to their asks and take it up the ladder and fight for them, do the same thing for the one woman, the anomaly that comes to you and asks for the same kind of help and the same kind of treatment. Unfortunately, that was one of the biggest issues that I've had. And also, I think it's also the other place where I see it. It's in the place of where people are supposed to be allocating fund and money and investing in women, right? And if you have women that are in the places that can make those decisions, you tend to see
mhm.
them um, treat the women not with understanding of the restrictions and the problems that they have that the men in the industry do not, right? The restrictions, the issues, the difficulties that a woman has to deal with, you got to have a sense for that and you got to appreciate it. And you got to be able to not to give them free ride or anything
Mhm.
like that, but you got to give them the benefit of the doubt and you got to work with them to be able to get them to the level that you need them to be so that you can fund them, you can allocate funding to them, or you can invest in them, or your company can invest in them. I think we are very capable and able of empowering each other, but at the same time, we are very able and capable of hurting each other, being a roadblock in front of each other, and making sure that we do not see other women climbing the ladder, whether it is under us or next to us. It doesn't have to be that people do that to you that are your supervisors, or
Yeah.
it's industry. It's industry, unfortunately.
Yeah. I had an interview on Monday where we talked about the limited resource myth, and we discussed how women often view upward mobility as a finite resource, which obviously leads to a lot of competition and blocking each other. How have you fostered a culture at Spotlight where women see each other as a ladder rather than a hurdle?
Well, I think they see me. right? I create the culture by being who I am and being in the place I am. Just seeing me in the place I am would allow
Mhm.
other women to think that that is something that they can do. Sometimes when they're looking from the outside, they don't see the struggles. So it
Mm.
might look like some fancy, shiny object that you want to achieve. But in reality, the people who actually worked under me or worked with me always understood that it's not always about the shiny awards or the pictures or the beautiful speeches that we give, but it's about the struggles, the everyday struggles and everyday fires that we have to put out. And it needs someone to be able to see it and appreciate it and understand what it takes to be able to get there and move up. So I think the culture is created by just me being me on an everyday basis.
Mhm. Do you think it's more effective for us as women to lean in, or do you think it's time for women in architecture, engineering, and construction to start actually taking down and rebuilding those structures, those patriarchal structures from scratch to be inclusive by design?
I think the moment you force anything and you make it so that it has to be completely cleaned up and scratched and made from the base up,
Mm.
you're giving yourself a lot more trouble. I don't think you can change the narrative of the conversation. I think you have to slowly create it. I can I keep on saying I appreciate a lot of diversity and inclusion awards that I have received or shout outs and everything else that I've received because of being a woman in this industry. But I also find it very bittersweet. I find it
Yeah.
sad. And I say, up until the day where we are giving ourselves, you company did 30%, woman. Now look at the where you hired those women. It's not just that you hired a certain gender. It's, where did you hire them? In what places did you hire them? Like, I think the KPIs that we would base these reviews on needs to change. I think we need to make it so that it becomes an organic thing versus forced. We need to start awarding yourself when we do it, because it it means nothing when you're awarding someone for doing the right thing. You need to be awarding people for breaking barriers, doing new things, coming up with new ideas. Whatever the gender is, you got to treat them the same way. But when it
Mhm.
comes to saying that because you're hiring more women or more of the people from the Black community or from diverse communities, oh, you're winning an award and you're doing such a good job.
Yeah.
You're already bringing the KPIs down, because it all becomes about numbers. It doesn't become about the quality of the work you're doing. It becomes, okay, how many people did we hire? How many of them are women? Without the regard of making sure that that number is spread evenly between the positions starting from the C-class suite all the way down. So I think we have to be the facilitators of this concept becoming an organic concept,
Yeah.
where we don't have to be fighting for it, getting awards for it, and this becomes something that's natural. And women who are sitting in the places where they can hire and they can do that and they can have those decision making abilities play a very important role in making sure that that happens.
That's wonderful. I think from the building perspective and the cost of inclusion perspective, I think there's a common misconception that inclusive might mean expensive or less profitable. So from a profit and loss standpoint, how do you prove to investors that multi-generational living, equitable housing, all of those things is actually a more resilient long-term asset?
That's a very interesting question, but a very difficult one to answer. Every
Mm.
single investor has their own ways of measuring the returns of a project, and 99.9% of them do not look at the impacts that you're creating. It doesn't matter what kind of impact it is; it's always the numbers at the end. The numbers speaks for themselves. So I think what I had to go through and what I had to fight for was to make sure that my numbers, because that's what they see first and that's what they see last, is the numbers are lining up with the rest of the projects in the industry. And that's when I could have gotten the attention. There are
Mhm.
some impact
Mhm.
funds, there are some projects where companies or groups that claim that they are putting those thresholds above other thresholds. Unfortunately, I am yet to see someone that actually holds what do you call it, their company motto, as being impact investors, or looking at affordability, or looking at this, or at the end of the day, it's about numbers, and
Yeah.
those funds that are really impact focused are not large enough to be able to carry these type of projects forward. So I think at the end of the day, what I would do is I would try, what I have to do is I have to access and try to grab any incentives, any government funding, any resources that I can bring to the project to make sure that at the end of the day, the numbers speaks for themselves.
I think that's wonderful. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to mention to our readers?
I have gone through a lot of difficulties in the past 2, 3 years because of the market and where everything was going. And I think what I've learned in our industry, and I think this is true for every other industry, is stop celebrating everybody else's failures. Stop celebrating their wins, but stop celebrating their failures, because some people can get up from those failures, some people can put their hands on their knees and get back up, and some people just can't. And you need to understand and appreciate where they're coming from, and you need to understand what they're going through, while they're going through all the hardships and the failures that they're going through. I think we close our eyes as human beings, and this is not generalized towards men or women. It's a general comment about our society and our industry. We tend to close our eyes and think of things as a topic of conversation, gossip. If you think that men don't gossip, I guarantee you they gossip more than we do. And I
Yeah.
am in a male dominated industry. Let's stop creating more conversations around misery. Let's create more
Yeah.
conversations around people succeeding and people getting themselves out of the situations that they're in. Let's make those phone calls when you hear about somebody going through a failure. Make those phone calls to offer a helping hand, not
Yeah.
phone calls out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Curious calls do not help, but
No,
helping hands do help. So
I love that.
let's as a community, let's as a society, let's rethink the way we deal with news, and we deal with failures and misery.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly succinct. Thank you. I know you're busy. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Perfect. Thank you so much.